Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is the second day of January in the year of our Lord 2026. In this Castle Report, I will be talking about the world as I see it today, along with some of year end thoughts about the past, which we can use to analyze the present and hopefully the future. Quote, Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God, end quote. Those are the words of the Prince of Peace, whose birth we just celebrated, and his words have been the bedrock of Western civilization for over 2,000 years. The decorations, gifts, celebrations are just one of our connections to a Christian culture that has held Western civilization together throughout its history. My thanks once again for Dr. Ron Paul's recent Liberty Report, where he so eloquently sets these concepts out for us. Somehow, it all seems different now. The mayor of New York City has been sworn in on the Quran rather than the Bible. The nation itself, with debt having surpassed $38 trillion, continues its enforcement of the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which in part is part of the Project for a New American Century. Paul Wolfowitz added his name on a policy that still seems to drive the American government even under the America First president. Simply put, that doctrine says that American hegemony will dominate the world. No competition which threatens that policy will be allowed to rise. The U.S. military will be used to destroy any competition that might arise. In practical terms, it means that the U.S. government will continue to use its military to bankrupt the country while exporting misery and suffering to others in pursuit of a global military empire on the framework of ancient Rome. My argument for you today is that this policy places the U.S. government in direct opposition to the title of this Castle Report. This year marked the first time the defense budget has surpassed the $1 trillion mark. Congress was so enthusiastic about it that it voted more money than the president actually asked for. The $1 trillion doesn't include interest on the defense-related debt, veterans affairs such as hospitals, and lifetime care for the wounded, components of other agencies and departments with items related to defense. So the figure is actually much larger than the published amount. Those who are responsible for such things probably still have a chance to save the economy if they did the responsible thing, but instead of doing the responsible thing, they repeatedly and often do the opposite of the right thing. President Eisenhower was the last president to recognize what was happening and to refuse its allure. He also warned President Kennedy, who tried to heed the warning, but he died for those efforts. I paraphrase President Kennedy's famous speech from 1953 entitled, quote, The Chance for Peace. Each of these dollars spent on military offense and maintenance of the U.S. global empire rather than on defense of our own nation is taken from the mouths of the hungry and off the backs of hardworking American families, end quote. The new national security strategy just recently published by the Trump administration has set off a firestorm among those who favor warfare to solve every perceived problem. The document seems to be a reversal of the foreign policy doctrine that has existed since the end of World War II. That policy included the formation of NATO, with the U.S. as the unofficial guarantor of military security. The U.S. would accept responsibility for the defense of Western Europe and ensure that the Soviet Union was held intact. In return, the U.S. would have a reserve currency status and would, through that status, control the world's economy. Reserve currency status ensured that the U.S. would have the means, through the accumulation of debt, to fund its military in all circumstances. This was also a recognition by Europe that it was free to devote virtually all of its resources to rebuilding and to the welfare projects that would keep its citizens comfortable and thereby avoid revolution. The new strategy document seems to refute that policy, and it appears to place Europe in some responsibility for its own defense. The Europeans don't like the policy. They don't like it at all, but they're at least verbally adjusting to it. They came up with a way to obtain loans of up to $100 billion for Ukraine to continue the war down to the last Ukrainian. The last few years have seen them trying to provoke a new war with Russia, and thus this new policy might have a chilling effect on that desire. The U.S. also increased to $800 million its request for the defense bill for Ukraine. Joan and I were talking about all this over breakfast the other day, and she pointed out that people are starting to see fraud despite media refusal to discuss it. Some of those things, like the fraud of the Somali community up in Minnesota, the election fraud in Georgia, now freely admitted, are all obvious. They're obvious, but we also have the American people seeing their standard of living eaten away by inflation and an economy declining because it's burdened by debt. People are becoming aware of all this more and more as they see their country committed to the defense and the foreign policy of a foreign country far, far away from us. The people have come to realize that if they express criticism of that country's foreign policy, the argument requires them to defend a charge of anti-Semitism instead of the actual foreign policy. The same is true of the billions of fraud in Minnesota because the governor of that state said that criticism was white supremacy. So the argument is a defense of the charge of white supremacy instead of the actual fraud. Jones' position is that people are not ignorant of this, despite media's refusal to report and investigate. They are aware of what's going on. My response to her was, yes, Joan, you're right. That puts us in the most dangerous position possibly ever. People see rampant crime and they see theft by government. They see government saying America first, but its foreign policy seems to put another country's interests first. That creates a dangerous, revolutionary atmosphere. I'm afraid that people are becoming aware that one of the founding principles which helped make America great is being erased. That principle is the empowerment of the individual over the power of the collective to demand obedience and compliance. In American culture, the individual counts. I'm afraid many are losing sight of that. The individual can take an individual stand against injustice without fear of reprisal from government. When governors have no argument against fraud except those who uncover it and point it out are white supremacists, and when senators have no response to pointing out the foreign policy faults of another country except to accuse those who object of anti-Semitism, it means government officials have lost the argument because they have nothing to say. The real problem happens when government sees the argument as it has currently, which makes fraud and waste obvious to anyone. People try to change the system through voting, but they see that it does not change very much. The worst frustration is that the dangerous revolutionary Civil War tension is created when people see it, understand it, but nothing is ever done. They see fraud costing billions. They know that is just the tip of the iceberg. They see their money taken by the IRS to fund the wars in favor of other nations. They see fraud at every level, and yet they are struggling to get by. They cannot get by without accumulating debt, which becomes unpayable. They know the difference between their debt and the government's debt is that they actually have to answer for theirs. Some of the things which have changed the lifestyles of the American people since the end of the COVID confinement are really startling for American families. Since COVID, gas for utilities up 48.8%, car maintenance and repair up 48.8%, car insurance up 56.1%, coffee up 46.1%, electricity 40.4%, meat 38.1%, used cars 33.6%, bread 29.4%, and milk 24.1%. I could go on and on with these numbers, but just ask yourself if your income since COVID has increased by anything close to those numbers. So we can see the elements of an explosion building, smoldering. Couple this to the knowledge people have that they must send their children to schools, which are run by the people who hate them. Their children will be indoctrinated by teachers who hate them, so their children will become like those who hate them, and they will look to people who have caused the problem for the answer to the problem. Thus, the inauguration of the mayor of our greatest city on the Koran. I know what you must be thinking, it's not every one of them. It's not everyone. Some are officials who really do care. Well, yes, yes, folks, I know about those people, but the truth is, the ones who claim to care make some angry speech to that effect, and then they go on about their business as if nothing happened. That is the demoralizing truth that we face here in the first month, the first Friday, 2026. In conclusion, folks, whether we know it or not, we are all beneficiaries of the religion created by the one who is the author of the title of this Castle report. The moral doctrine created by that religion has curbed power and defended the weak and the helpless for over 2,000 years. When you lay aside those moral principles, you have power unleashed, enforced through force, not limited by anything, to paraphrase Mr. Lennon, that is. Finally, folks, as we start 2026, I close with another quote from President Eisenhower, or at least I paraphrase him. Quote, "The people of the world are so desperate for peace that sooner or later the governments will have to step aside and let them have it," end quote. At least that's the way I see it, folks. Until next time, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.